Hello folks, this is Ken and thank you for tuning in to the Model Building and Retirement channel. Got a special one for you today. We're going to do a complete review of the new Gaahleri Turbox Mini air compressor with included airbrush, and we're going to do a complete test on one of my actual models. And at the end of this, we're giving this away. So let's roll the intro and we'll get right into it. Sponsored by Model Makers Workshop. Need parts for your next model project? Model Makers Workshop has you covered with the best aftermarket accessories around. And by Gaahleri, your one-stop shopping for all your airbrush needs. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, I'm going to do a complete review of the Turbox Mini air compressor and the GAHD 39 airbrush that's included with it. And we're going to put it through the ringer here. We're going to do an unboxing. We're going to talk about all the specifications. And I'm going to do a complete test on this, but not on a silly old spoon. What we're going to do is I'm going to use an actual build that we're working on. This is going to be the Revell 32 Ford Roadster. And this is going to be a really cool paint job. So we are going to be spraying Fusion Firm Chrome, and then we're going to be painting Candy Pink. Then we're going to add some decals, and then we're going to clear this all with this airbrush and this compressor. And in the end, somebody's going to win this. That's right, a screen-used prop from the Model Building and Retirement channel. So this may be worth some money someday. So we'll have all the specs on the airbrush, and we'll talk about the contest rules coming up. And there's going to be a key word snuck in the middle of this video. And in the end, I'll tell you all the rest of the rules for how you can win this. So stick around. Okay, so let's start off with an unboxing. Comes very nicely packaged. First thing you see is an instruction booklet. And that covers all your basics of how to operate the machine and warranty information and whatnot. And it has different languages there. And then there's a nice little foam protection sheet here, which reveals the airbrush and compressor and all your accessories. Comes with some spare O-rings for your airbrush, which is really nice and handy to have. And then it is equipped with the GAHD 39 airbrush, has the .35 millimeter needle and nozzle combination, and comes with a nice size cup. And the .35 is pretty good for most applications. And then it also comes with the attachment for your hose. And next up, this little box has your power adapter, plugs into the wall, has a nice long cord to it, and also in that box is a little airbrush holder attachment that conveniently attaches to the compressor, so you can actually hold your airbrush right there, so you can have that at your workstation. And then the compressor itself is nicely wrapped and sealed here, so you can tell it's brand spanking new. Very nice, firm, heavy feel to it. Comes with a screen protector and everything on there, and I'm going to leave that intact because, as I said, I'm going to give this away at the end of the video after we test it all out. So has a one-touch knob there. You can press that to turn your power on. You can toggle between temperatures and your pressures and whatnot. So a very nice little unit. And then when you pull everything out underneath, you'll find a 6-foot hose. Simply attach that to your compressor and to your airbrush, and you got everything you need to go to do a paint job. So let's go over a couple of the specifications here before we put it through the tests. So the Turbox Mini comes in two variations. One is with the airbrush included, or you could get just the compressor only, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that and where you can purchase that a little later in the video. Okay, and as I said earlier, comes equipped with the Gaahleri 39 airbrush with the 0.35 millimeter needle and nozzle. And let me tell you folks, this is a workhorse of an airbrush. This is what they consider the entry level, but I have painted probably 30 models with this particular model, and my paint jobs have been beautiful, so don't be fooled by the price. So the compressor is a nice compact size. It measures 14 by 10 by 6 centimeters and delivers a constant stable air pressure between 10 to 20 psi depending on the size of your airbrush. And I believe the maximum pressure setting is up to 36 psi. And it has a very nice digital display, and you can toggle between your working pressures to temperatures in either Fahrenheit or Celsius. And it'll measure in PSI or bar pressure. Very simple press and twist controls. Comes with some presets there, so you can quickly tap and toggle between low, medium, and high pressures, or you can turn the knob and adjust pressures to your own personal preferences. And then another press of the toggle button, and you can go to the smart temperature control. So it has built-in overheat warnings. So once the temperature of the motor gets to 85 degrees Celsius, it'll flash and suggest that you give it a rest. Through all the testing I did, I never saw a warning. And here's a bunch of fancy words to let you know that it's quiet at 48 decibels maximum. And there's a compatibility switch in the back where you can switch between standard or compatible to lower pressure settings, such as if you're going to spray with a 0.2 millimeter needle or nozzle or smaller. And here's some of the basic technical specifications. So it's powered by a 110 outlet brick that converts to 12 volt DC, and rated pressure is 8 to 36 psi with a maximum pressure setting of 48 psi. Has 18 adjustable levels, and comes with a 1/8 inch diameter hose. And once again, what's in the box is you get the mini compressor, the Gaahleri 39 airbrush, 6 foot of air hose, a user's manual, airbrush holder, and a power adapter. Okay, so to test the airbrush and compressor, we're going to actually spray an actual car here instead of a spoon. So we're going to be using a Revell 32 Ford Roadster, and this is going to be a unique paint job. What we're going to start out with is we're going to be using the Fusion Firm Liquid Chrome, and this is the airbrush version. So we're going to shoot this straight out of the airbrush using the Gaahleri 39, and let's watch that application.
So to power it on, you just press and hold this button, and it automatically is showing PSI. And if you toggle that, if you hit like twice, you're going to see your temperature. This has a built-in temperature sensor because, you know, it does create friction when it's running, and has an automatic cutoff. I think it's 85 degrees, so that if it overheats, it'll blink and tell you that you should shut it off. The reviews I showed that it never even hit that, but it's handy to have that temperature. So it's 69 degrees down here in the basement, which is good painting temperature. Okay, so to adjust your PSI, what you do is you get to the PSI range, pull so you can turn your knob to whatever, and then push and release your air on your gun and let it recover. So right now it's set at 25. I want to go to about 22 psi. So I'm going to turn it down a couple knots. I'm going to exhaust a little air out of the gun. Go down another pound. It's 20. Okay, about 21 psi. Now it does go down when you're putting demand on it. All compressors do. I was a little bit worried because when you push this down, it's showing 7 psi pressure, which is pretty low. but I tested it against my other normal compressor, and I can feel the pressure, and it's very similar. So whatever you set your dial at, that's what you want to do. So if something's calling for an 18 to 20 psi, get your setting to 18 to 20, and don't worry about when you're pushing your air nozzle down and that drops. But we're going to put it to the test and make sure that's not an issue. Should not be. Okay, so I'm going to go to the booth and we're going to do a little spray out here with some, we're going to start with some chrome.
Okay, so we're at the booth, and as you saw, I have my pressure set around between 20 and 22 psi. Now I'm applying the Fusion Firm full strength, no cutting, no mixing whatsoever, and I'm spraying very liberal wet coats, just making sure it's all nice and uniform, and then it'll level out on its own. And all this was done with one coat and one coat only. I would not recommend trying to recoat once you've already got that sprayed on there. So just make sure you got it on there nice and wet. And like I said, it will self-level itself really well. Sprayed really well. I've just got some alcohol in here to flush out the airbrush, and then I'll disassemble lightly and do some of my cleanup there. But even though that pressure drops as you're pulling back the trigger, I did find it was consistent during that entire paint job, so it appears to be running at your set point, so about 21 psi. Even though the digital gauge is dropping, that is very consistent and it's sprayed very well. So I'm spraying out all that alcohol out of the gun continuously here. It recovers pretty well to your set point or close to it. Okay, then if you press twice, you get that temperature. So we're at 78 degrees. I think we started out at 69. And if I remember correctly, the instructions say that it has a built-in shut-off at 85 degrees, I think it is. So it does not feel hot, does not feel warm. 78, it didn't get anywhere near that limit. So very happy with it. Does a pretty darn good job. Okay, I'm gonna finish cleaning up and then we'll come back and look at that finish. Okay, so let's take a look at the body after I sprayed that with that Fusion Firm liquid chrome. First time I ever sprayed it on anything this large before. So it self-levels really, really, really nice. And luckily I didn't get much dust in there. There's a little bit, but there's not much you're going to be able to do about that. You're not going to be able to sand it away or anything until you've top coated it. But it leveled out really nice. And I loaded it on pretty wet, as you saw. Okay, so being that this stuff takes a while to cure, they say 72 hours. I probably want to give it longer, probably 5 days. We'll come back. But what I'm going to do is just let this sit here and dry for a couple hours. And then I'm going to very carefully just transfer everything to a Tupperware bin with a lid on it. And I'm going to leave the lid just cracked open so it can breathe. But the main reason for putting it in there is to kind of keep it dust free for the next 5 days or so, because I don't want to have to do much prep before I go to my color, candy color. So, all right, so we'll be back. Okay, so then I gave the Fusion Firm 4 full days to cure and never touched it once. The only thing I could really do is wipe it with my little anti-static brush, because I didn't want any fingerprints, I didn't want any marring or anything, so you can't sand it or anything. Luckily, I took precautions and didn't have any dust to be concerned with. So the next step up is we're going to use the clear pink color, and that is the KC010, and that comes out of the 12 clear color set from Kaleido that was just recently announced. And we're going to shoot that diluted 20% with thinner and retarder thinner. And let's watch that. Dust specks, you could just lightly hit it with your anti-static brush. Okay, so I have everything ready, and I'm gonna spray the Kaleido Clear Pink, and that is number KC010. And my friend Craig Gordon over at Stumpy Grump's Skill Model Shop, he's what I consider an expert in water-based acrylics, and he has been dialing in his Kaleidos, and I've been adding just a little bit of retarder occasionally to my mix, but I'm going to follow his suggestion. So what he's done is he's taken their acrylic thinner, and he's brand new bottle, 60 milliliters, and he's taken the retarder thinner and added 10% mix to his bottle. So this is thinner plus 10% retarder. And then what he's doing is he's diluting and thinning the Kaleido paints by 20%, so 80% paint, 20% thinner. And I'm going to try that. You do have to be careful because it's going to be thinner and runnier, so you got to be extremely careful with your airbrush. And I will be shooting with my 0.3 millimeter Seeker airbrush at about 20 psi pressure. And just depending on the color I'm going for, I'm estimating 2 coats, but we'll just take it from there. So we're gonna get all set up at the booth and get the new Turbox mini air compressor fired up and meet you at the booth. Okay, so I'm at the booth, and I apologize, I said I was going to be using my Seeker airbrush, but no, I am using the Turbox Mini's accompanied airbrush that comes with the mini compressor, GHAD 39. This is a workhorse of an airbrush. But there's one thing that I want to talk about that you guys might have noticed in all my paint jobs, is this is what they call the needle cap here. This goes at the very end of your airbrush, right at the tip here, and it protects your tip. So it's kind of an important thing. Let's see if I can be focused here. There we go. It protects your tip, but I never use it, which is a risk, because if you bump your tip or your needle, you're going to bend your needle and ruin it pretty much. Good luck trying to straighten it and save that. But the reason I don't use it, and especially when I'm with water-based acrylics, is, in my opinion, it gives you paint buildup, and that paint buildup starts gathering right around the tip of your needle, and you get what's called needle dry, tip dry. Now, to counter that, I've not been using this at all, and I keep a bottle of warm water or a cup of warm water and a paintbrush handy, and if my tip got a little dry, I would take that brush and just kind of clean the outside of my airbrush like so. Well, I was shopping at Gaahleri site the other day ordering some new paints, and I see that they sell this optional crown needle cap. And I'm going to try that because it's got a crown around it, which is supposed to help it evenly distribute your spray pattern, but also it doesn't gather up the paint like the rounded one does here. So we're going to try that out and see if that helps me, because I do hate being vulnerable. So we're going to give that a try. Okay, so I'm going to fire up the Turbox Mini to spray the clear pink, and it's pretty much dialed into where I want. I want to be between 20 and 21 psi. So what I'm looking for is every time I pull the trigger where it returns to. Pretty consistent between 21 and between 20 and 22 pounds psi. So that's good enough for me. I'm not worried about how that is showing that low number right now, because I have done a comparison with my other airbrush and my other compressor, and the feel is very similar. So that does not feel like 6 pounds, it feels more like 20 psi. So, okay, we're gonna get that out of our way. Okay, and I'm gonna start with something inconspicuous like this little bracket for the bottom of the chassis. Okay, so I go to the booth, and as usual, I always start with my smaller pieces first, and there's a good reason for that, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I went on to spray my medium wet coats that I've learned how to do from my testing originally when the clear coats came out, and I immediately noticed a reaction with the Fusion Firm, and I'm like, oh boy, got a problem here. Quickly made an adjustment and started spraying extremely light coats to the rest of the parts just to kind of sneak up on it. And what I'm doing is creating a barrier, and that barrier is actually, it's to prevent the solvents from the top coat paint to interfere with the solvents of the underlying paint, in this case Fusion Firm, because the Fusion Firm is not intended to be painted over. In fact, the Airbrush Fusion Firm does not even come with its own varnish like the original Fusion Firm brush stuff does. The Airbrush version is not intended to be top coated by any means. Okay, so I was able to determine that my adjustment to the process was actually working, so I was not seeing a reaction right now. So I went ahead and put on, I'm going to say probably about 4 or 5 very light little mist coats. So it took a considerable amount of time, and let that all dry up. And then that finally created that barrier that I was talking about, where I was able to go a little bit wetter with my paint. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up this process through all those lighter coats. Okay, so I did have some issues when I painted the clear pink onto the model. When I did my initial test of the translucents, I was able to go right to medium wet coats, and usually about 2 coats would do it. But luckily, and this is why it's always important to paint little parts first before just going right to your model. So I painted, I think there was a guitar included with it first, and I went right for that medium wet coat. But I didn't stop to consider that there was a reaction between the fusion film and the paint. So you have to sneak up on that a little bit. What you got to do is you got to go very light coats to allow a little barrier to build up on the chrome before you can go into any kind of wet coats. And that was working really well. I didn't have any reaction whatsoever. But the problem with that is by the time I got several light coats on there, the paint was sitting out there for a considerable amount of time, and it began to coagulate or gum up a little bit, if you will, and it started clogging my airbrush. And I even switched to another airbrush just to make sure it wasn't the Gaahleri 39, but I had the exact same problem with my Seeker. So I ended up, stopping, cleaning everything, and just letting the paint dry up and cure up, mixed up a brand new batch, and shot 2 more final wet coats on there. So had nothing to do with the airbrush or the compressor, but I wanted to point that out. I did have a little struggle with the color, and you might have noticed that in the videos.
Okay, so with that being said, I finally regrouped, got back to the booth, and I was able to finally shoot my 2 medium coats on there as intended in the first place, and I'm just only showing one of the 2 here. So I was really happy with the way that sprayed out in the end, but it just goes to show that you can make adjustments and save a paint job. And a lot of people ask, if you could put lacquer on top of enamel, for example, and generally the consensus is no, for the very same reason. The hot solvents of the lacquer usually reactivates what's below it. But if you're very, very careful, I don't really recommend it. But if you do this process here, where you just sneak up on it with a whole bunch of little mist coats to kind of create that barrier first, generally then you may be able to pull that off.
Okay, so after allowing that pink to cure up for at least 12 hours, I added a couple water slide decals to the side of the car, and got those molded on there real nice, and let that sit overnight before I went on to the clear coat.
Okay, we're going to put some flame decals on this before we clear coat. Okay, I screwed up the first ones. Luckily I had a second set, a little different design. Kind of works good with that pink. Okay, so we are at the booth for the final time to spray clear, Kaleido clear varnish onto the model, and that's going to be glossy varnish. And again, we're using the Gaahleri Turbox mini air compressor, and I got that dialed in to 22.5 psi pressure, and it's accompanying Gaahleri 39 airbrush, all loaded up with clear. So we're gonna get this cleared up. Let's watch the progress.
Okay, so I decided with the clear that I would shoot 4 coats. Normally I would do 2 wet coats, but I wanted to bury those decals. So later on I'm going to be able to sand and buff that out. And it may even be possible that if I see a little bump where those decals are, I may sand and hit it with one more clear coat, but that's going to be on another video. So this is the first of 4 medium coats, and I will just speed this up and then we'll get to that final coat. Okay, and here's a look at it after the paint has dried up, after 4 coats of clear. Gonna let that cure up, and then I'm gonna sand and polish that up on another video. That won't be on this video. Just about the look I was hoping for.
Okay, so the clear went on there very, very nice. That was 4 nice wet coats on there. Got a really nice high gloss on it. Not going to be on this video, but I'm going to let that cure up for a couple days, and I'm going to sand and buff that out. You'll see that on an actual build video for that model. But my thoughts of the air compressor. You know, I was really kind of surprised by it because the one I use is the Gaahleri tank compressor, so it has like 2 people could use it at the same time. It has 2 ports on it, but it has a holding tank, so it keeps you very consistent pressure. You know, it'll kick on and off to maintain your pressure, but it has a holding tank so that you never have a drop off. So I was kind of concerned about that with the Turbox, but you know what, it produces live air pretty good. Now, as you saw in probably the demo, you may start out at 22 or 25 psi, and as soon as you pull the air trigger, you'll see that pressure drop. But I noticed that it held the same kind of pressure by feel as my other compressor. So, and I didn't feel any drop off that affected the painting. The paint flowed and went on real nice, the clear coat and everything. So I'm quite impressed with it. I think it's a pretty good little compressor, especially at its price point. And I certainly can't complain about the GHAD 39 Airbrush because that's a workhorse. I've used that on, oh boy, probably at least 30 or 40 builds and some stellar paint jobs at that. So, you know, no, it just goes to show that $20 to $29 airbrush can give you some pretty nice results. You don't need to go out there and spend $150 for an airbrush. Okay, so let's talk about pricing first and where you can get this. So the combination that we see in the video with the Turbox Mini air compressor with the airbrush is only available on Gaahlerie's Amazon store. And that retails currently at $79.99. And then when you go to checkout, they have a 10% discount that applies to that. So that knocks it down to $71.99. Then you can use my code, which I have right up above here, and that's a different code for the Amazon store versus their website. And in my link in my description, I will have links and the discount codes for both their store and the Amazon store. But anyways, using MBIR Ken 10, you can get an additional 10% off on the Amazon site. So that knocks that price all the way from $79.99 all the way down to $64.79. Folks, that's an airbrush and a compressor and everything you need. So you can't beat that. Now they do have a version without the airbrush only on their website. And I believe the retail price there for the Turbox mini compressor is $59. And then you can use my discount and link in the description, and using Model Building Ken as the code, you can get 10% off of that. So, you know, you have your choice. If you don't need the airbrush, you can save a little bit of money. Okay, and as I said in the beginning of this video, I'm giving this away. So this is going to be the screen used compressor and airbrush. And if you want, at no extra charge, I will autograph it for you because it's going to be a screen used prompt for Model Building and Retirement channel. Might be worth some money someday. Just kidding. Anyways, here's the contest rules.
Okay, so the rules are that it is limited to the first 500 entries, and you must enter to win no later than midnight on 4/30/2026 Eastern Daylight Time. Due to shipping costs, it's only available to the lower 48 states, so if you live outside the continental U.S., you will be disqualified. I'm sorry. Please like and subscribe. It's not required, but it is absolutely free. To opt in, type hashtag Turbox in the comment section. Only one entry per person. The drawing will be held and the winner announced on May 1st, 2026, and the winner must respond within 5 days with their shipping address or the prize will go to an alternate winner. Good luck and have fun.
And we're going to pick a winner. So good luck to you on the contest. It's a lot of fun. I'm happy to give this away. This was sent to me compliments of Gaahleri, so I'm going to just pass on that deal to you. But it's a really nice deal, especially if you don't have a compressor or an airbrush or anything and you've been thinking about it. I mean, you can't beat winning one. So, okay. Well, folks, I appreciate it. Good luck with the contest, and we'll see you May 1st.